Hey everyone, I'm Jay.
And I'm Sean.
And we watched a movie.
Guess which one?
I mean, I hope you can guess which one. It's Halloween or pretty near, and we're talking about The Nightmare Before Christmas. And maybe you can also tell my costume this year. And this little guy, Walt is being Vampire Teddy. Yeah, good boy, Walt. And Sean is a little lame, but I have a better Jack Skellington by the name of Bronx. So I'll put in photos of that cute guy too, just so you can see all of the wonderful Halloween costumes in the house this year. So finally it's time to talk about one of our favorite movies, Halloween or No, Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. Ta-da! Does she look like me?
And like I used to look?
I mean, he has a bigger smile than you ever do, let's just say. So those are some of the pumpkins I made this year in honor of our collaboration. So we are doing a Nightmare Before Christmas collab with Discovering the Art of Living. Our good friend and fellow Canadian Sue on her channel is doing artwork inspired by the movie. And she's actually got a great big playlist full of people who are doing all kinds of really cool stuff inspired by the movie. And boy, is this the movie to do it, because there are a few others like it that have so many iconic images, characters. This is really an art-driven movie. As you know, Sean, I love stop-motion animation. I think it is crazy beautiful. I love looking at it and admiring all the little details that, you know, somebody's hands have lovingly crafted to put in this, even just for a second of film. So this is one of those movies that I love talking about from the crazy mind of Tim Burton. He actually wrote this as a poem quite a long time ago, way before the movie came to fruition. He was inspired by seeing the Halloween decorations in a store window be replaced the next day with Christmas decorations. And he was really struck by that juxtaposition of the ghosts and goblins and vampires and zombies, and then reindeer and elves and those things. And he thought, that's a really funny thing. Now, of course, that's how you know how old the poem is, because now they start taking Christmas stuff out in August. So that kind of overlap never happens anymore. But back then it did. So everyone loves this wonderful Tim Burton movie, except for it's not really a Tim Burton movie. He didn't even write it. It is inspired by his poem. He invented the character of Jack Skellington. Apparently he's been drawing that skeleton since he was a kid. And you can tell it was in movies in some iterations. You can see little skeleton figures in stuff well before Nightmare Before Christmas. I keep wanting to say Nightmare on Elm Street. Help me, it is that time of year. So in fact, it is Henry Selick who is directing this movie. He was the director of James and the Giant Peach and Coraline. So Tim Burton universe is not that unlike the kind of stuff that Henry Selick is doing. So they were a pretty good fit. So aside from having inspired the theme, the characters, Tim Burton also serves as a producer on this film. Now, Jack Skellington, the Pumpkin King, is voiced by Chris Sarandon, but he was only cast because he was a good voice fit for Danny Elfman. The great Danny Elfman scores the heck out of this movie, wrote songs like nobody's business, and he is the singing voice of Jack Skellington. So they cast Chris Sarandon as his speaking voice because it seemed like a pretty good match.
And Danny Elfman was consumed with the rest of the movie.
Yeah, that's right. He was busy. The wonderful Catherine O'Hara, of course, voices Sally. So how can I not be a Sally girl since I am 100%, 110% a Catherine O'Hara girl? And so is Tim Burton.
Yes, he is.
You'll notice this cast has a lot of Tim Burton favorites. William Hickey actually voices the evil scientist Dr. Finkelstein. Glenn Shadix, Catherine O'Hara's co-star on Beetlejuice, voices the mayor. Paul Reubens. Paul Reubens does the voice of Locke. You know, the Lock, Shock, and Barrel characters.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So he is Locke. Of course, Pee-wee started Tim Burton off all those years ago. And the wonderful Ken Page voices Oogie Boogie. He is the villain in this movie, I suppose. He never seems all that villainous to me.
Well,
I mean,
he is
everybody,
the boogeyman.
yeah, he is. But like everybody in Halloween Town is something. Like
Yes,
they're all
that's true. They're monsters.
kind of monstrous. Anyways, so not all of these characters, Jack Skellington certainly, but not all of these characters come from the mind of Tim Burton. Oogie Boogie was not in the original poem. He was written for this movie. And yet all of these characters have taken on, really they've become something bigger than just characters in this movie. We love this movie. But Disney was so nervous about it. It was really feeling not like a kid's movie, not like normal Disney fare. And so at the last minute, they shunted it over to their Touchstone Pictures, the thing they released movies under when they didn't want to release them as Disney movies. However, because of its success and its huge cult following, Disney, of course, has now taken ownership of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it was always theirs. They didn't adopt it. They just acknowledged.
Brought it out of the
attic. Yeah, exactly. That is a very good one. Certain times of the year, especially, they definitely trot out Jack and Sally at Disney World for Halloween and even for Christmas. But we love them and we want them, and they're so cool to see. So stop motion animation is super crazy detailed work. It took 100 people 3 years to make this movie painfully, frame by frame by frame by frame. I don't know how you have the patience to do a movie like this, where for 1 second of film, you have to shoot 12 frames. So just so that it looks fluid, and it does look surprisingly fluid. But yeah, so it all comes together. You need so many little pictures with tiny, minute changes to make 1 second of fluid film. My goodness. It is hard to really think about that kind of dedication, where for each minute of movie, people worked tirelessly for a week to get that done. And that's not one set. They have several sets going with several camera crews. So they could be filming different portions of the movie at the same time on the same day. And it still took 3 years. It's crazy to me, the amount of hard work that goes into this movie and others like it. The doorknob scene, the infamous doorknob scene, when you see Jack Skellington reaching towards the doorknob on the Christmas door in the forest. That was the hardest, number one hardest, without any shadow of a doubt, hardest scene to pull off in the whole movie. Because that sort of golden doorknob reflects the forest behind him. So imagine all of these little things, these tiny little sculptures that they have to get properly lit, as if it is a whole big movie set, even though it's done in miniature scale. They have to light it, they have to have everything lined up perfectly with nothing visible in the background. And yet the camera has to come in over Jack's shoulder. We see his hand reaching for the knob, and the knob is just showing the reflection of all of these things back to us. So let's just take a minute to really think about how many people it took to pull off just a second or two of film. And yet they're so dedicated to getting that shot that they spent the time to do it and get it right. And probably, if you've seen the movie, you do know what I'm talking about, because it is a really terrific scene when Jack stumbles upon this place in the forest, and finds all of those doors. How many doors are there, Sean? Do you know?
There's a lot. I don't know exactly how many.
There are 7 doors. So, can you name them?
Well, there's Easter.
There's an Easter egg door.
St. Patrick's Day.
There is a 4-leaf clover door.
And that's probably all I know. Thanksgiving.
Okay. There is a turkey door.
Okay.
Christmas door. Christmas tree door. A pumpkin door. A heart door.
Valentine's.
Yeah. And a fleetingly seen 7th door with a red, white, and blue firework on it.
Oh.
I find that one a little
That's weird.
Controversial.
Yeah.
So, like I said, they had many stages going at the same time. So they were taking over 20 stages at the studio with 230 sets built, and over 100,000 frames went into the making of this movie. That is a lot of work. Yes, it is. 8 different camera crews were filming almost the whole time. So they really had a lot going at the same time. It takes a lot to orchestrate that many people. So clearly the director does deserve a lot of credit, especially as we remember it as a Tim Burton movie. And yet Henry Selick is the man who was actually on location. Tim Burton showed up maybe 8 times in the 3 years, just to put it all in perspective. Jack is so far the only black and white Disney character in a Technicolor film. So of course we've seen black and white Disney characters before, but they were in black and white movies. So he has no color except for when he's in the Santa suit. Everything on him is black and white. They made several dolls for him in case one broke, but also because they were filming often different scenes at the same time. So they have several dolls for him. It's clay. He is a clay-based doll wrapped in an armature. So it's got like little ball joints in it so that you can move all of the limbs. And they made 400 heads. So they all have minutely different expressions, so they can swap the heads in and out to achieve eventually a smile or a frown or singing, or 400 heads, which is a creepy briefcase. 400 heads. Meanwhile, Sally was a little more difficult because she's got long, beautiful hair. So to swap that whole head on and off would have been a lot of trouble they didn't want to take. So instead she has masks that will pop on to the head that stays on her doll, and the masks pop on and off to achieve the different expressions. So all of these little sets are built, and they're built to scale for the dolls that they've made. And they all have trap doors built into them for the animators to be able, when you're talking about changing the whole set 12 times per 1 second of film, you need the animators to be able to get in and out of there really quickly to get their job done. And you don't want to touch any part of the set that you don't absolutely have to. Because if you ruin one thing, that like 12 pictures, that's a whole day of filming that can be ruined if anything goes wrong on that set. So it is built with all these trap doors so that the animators can crawl under and through tubes and pop up near where the characters are stationed. There were a lot of things cut out of this movie, and it's funny to think about. First of all, Vincent Price was set to voice Santa Claus. In fact, he did come in and record Santa Claus, but his wife had died recently, and so his health started to fail, and his voice was very weak, and they found the stuff he'd recorded to be unusable. So unfortunately, they did have to recast Santa. Edward Ivory came in to do the role of Santa instead of poor Vincent Price, who actually died just 4 days after this film was released. Patrick Stewart was also cut from the film. Not because his voice was weak, though. He actually came into, he was reading the lines of the poem that Tim Burton wrote, and that was like the intro and the outro of the movie. But whenever they looked at it, they just felt like, oh, we need to get to the story a lot more quickly. So they really pared down to just a couple of lines now, and those lines are recited by Santa Claus, Edward Ivory. So Patrick Stewart got cut out of the movie, but if you have the soundtrack, you can probably still hear him say those lines. They are included in the soundtrack. So there are a lot of actually weird little cameos in this movie. Danny Elfman is not just the voice of Jack, he's in the movie as well, or at least his doll is. A doll made to his likeness plays a corpse in the movie, a corpse that you can see inside the upright base of the Halloweentown band. So if you look in there, there's a little red-headed corpse. That's Danny Elfman. Now, Tim Burton was supposed to make a similar cameo. You may remember the vampires playing hockey. They were shooting around Tim Burton's severed head on the ice. That was their puck. Disney had something to say about that. They felt, this is pushing it maybe a little gruesome for kids. So now it is a jack-o'-lantern that they're playing with, but that used to be Tim Burton's head. And that's a pretty cool cameo to have in a movie. But don't worry, there are Tim Burton thumbprints all over this place. You see it a lot when they're handing out the Christmas presents. When the Halloween guys are handing out Christmas presents, they hand out a big worm that looks a lot like the sandworm from Beetlejuice. They also give out a shrunken head that you see in that waiting room of Beetlejuice. A cat and a duck, both of whom look a lot like the things that they would later see in Batman Returns, which is what Tim Burton is working on. While Henry Selick is directing his Nightmare Before Christmas, Tim Burton is directing Batman Returns. So the duck, of course, is the penguin vehicle, and the cat is, and the logo, it's the logo from the department store, from the Shrek department store. One really big sort of win for Henry Selick in this is Disney is watching these characters come alive and all of the modeling that has to be done, and they're looking at this Jack Skellington doll, and he's a fine guy, everybody loves him, but Disney said, Jack needs eyes. Eyes are almost the number one thing in animation that animators use to connect with the audience. Their tests have repeatedly shown that that's the most important thing for us to feel like we can see their expression, their feelings. And Jack didn't have eyes, so Disney kept saying, we need eyes, we need Jack to have eyes. And obviously his sockets are black and empty. So Henry Selick and Tim Burton, the crew won out, and I think Disney did admit that they were right. Ultimately, they did not prove necessary. People love Jack Skellington, even though he is not a super great guy a lot of the time. He has won our hearts, and
he's trying.
He doesn't have eyes.
Confused.
He is. I mean, he can't help how he grew up. So obviously, lots of work goes into this. I find it really amazing, the artists, the animators who do this work day in, day out, and the people who, knit sweaters that are this big for a clay figure, and he's somebody who arranges flowers that are literally only millimeters big. There are 60 characters in this film, and like I said, there are 3 or 4 different dolls for each character. How many faces? That's an entirely different story. It's oil-based clay. Apparently, oil-based clay is good because you can use alcohol to smooth out the surface, and so you can easily take away the fingerprints the animators have left when they are adjusting things. Disney, of course, once this movie proved to be a success, wanted to do a sequel. And seeing all of those beautiful doors out in that forest does feel like it's lending itself to an obvious sequel potential. And Disney was thinking, why don't we do it CGI? Well, Tim Burton has really resisted the temptation to go back to this movie, even though it is very successful and very beloved. I called it cult status before, but I don't know about that cult stuff. It's not an underground film.
No.
I think it's something that...
big holiday movie.
Yeah, it is.
And 2 holidays.
That's right. And every day of the year. It's just a fun kind of gothic reimagining of some worlds that we think we're pretty familiar with. So yeah, Tim Burton is resisting the sequel, doesn't want to do it. I mean, there is a purity into what we saw, and just because Jack could go to Turkey Land doesn't mean he should.
It really means he shouldn't, based on how this turned out. He should have learned a lesson.
Yes. I mean, the thing about this is, and if there's anybody who hasn't seen this movie, go see this movie. You really need to see this movie. Jack Skellington is the Pumpkin King. He is not the mayor of Halloween Town, because there is a mayor of Halloween Town, but he's a very prominent citizen in Halloween Town. And every year they pull off, you know, all of the Halloween activities. But that's a 1-day-a-year job, and it's the same every year. And so Jack is just feeling a little burnt out on Halloween when he's bored. He is bored. When he stumbles across these doors in the forest, and he stumbles into
Christmas Town.
Christmas Town. Not very originally titled places, but yes, he's in Christmas Town. And the place feels like magic to him. And no kidding, because Christmas feels like magic to a lot of us. The decorations, the songs, the snow, you know, he's encountering all of these things for the first time, and it feels like magic and wonder, and people are happy. You know, his job is to scare people. And so this is a very different feeling. And he's, you know, the fish out of water, but he's just in wonder. He's got a wonderful song that's just full of that wonderment. And it is really fun to see him discover things. It is also really fun once he takes this idea back to Halloween Town, convinces everybody, let's do Christmas this year. You know, let's try something different, get out of our comfort zone. And they just don't get it right.
Well, of course they don't get it right.
They're ghouls, they're monsters, and everything comes out a little bit wrong. And yet, you know, I mean, I don't know why we have to think Christmas can only be this one thing, but this is kind of what the movie is telling us, that these Halloween people really just can't get it right. But I find it really endearing, the kind of spin they've put on things. He sees Santa Claus, but he hears Sandy Claus. And so that does immediately, just in the name, take on a very different kind of guy, and what we might expect him to be bringing people. So yes, it is, I think, kind of a fun film that spawned actually an excellent soundtrack. There are lots of great songs in this movie. So it's got a classic soundtrack with many iconic songs.
It does. You probably remember them all when you hear it, even if you can't think of what they are.
Yes. So many iconic songs, in fact, that a lot of people have covered them, which is kind of unusual for a Disney soundtrack. Marilyn Manson has covered This Is Halloween. Panic at the Disco has covered This Is Halloween. Jonathan Davis of Korn covered Kidnap the Sandy Claus. And he actually did it live on YouTube to show people how he rearranges a song. It was kind of cool to see. Amy Lee, you may remember her from Evanescence.
Oh, yeah.
This is going back some time.
Yeah, that's going back a long time.
She covered Sally's song. And of course, everybody, well, probably everybody, I hope everybody, knows the Blink 182 song, I Miss You, that actually references Jack and Sally. This movie is a wonderful film, Everyone should watch it. If you haven't seen it, it's Halloween. It's the perfect time of year to take it out for the first time. And when you fall in love with it, you can watch it again for Christmas. Like I mentioned at the top of the video, this is a collaboration post. So please check out. We will link below all of the wonderful people who are contributing. There's going to be lots of amazing artwork, and you've still got a few days before Halloween if you want to turn something out yourself. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.